This is partly a lament to the ever-changing Cotswold country pub and its lack of constancy and priority within the march of single concept, clear marketing of consumerism within the capitalist model, and a how-to video on the nutritional and health-giving properties of real cask ales, not your mass-produced chemical lagers, your blonde. There are still so many of them to discover, and I really should do a how-to on how to discover them. There's so many little lanes, so many little villages, single-track roads, riverside secrets there to be discovered. How should you do this? Well, I'd recommend at least a day van. A camper would be ideal, where you don't need to have someone share the driving. If you think about it, you can do a pub crawl in a day van. You can start 11:30, traditionally pubs used to open. So, have a pint in one. You can drive. You can drive a very zigzagging, meandering route because you're discovering the lanes, not because you've had a pint. Find another pub, have another pint. Choose a different ale. Try and choose the pubs from a camera, real ale, cask ale guide. By this time, you could still drive on to another place, perhaps to eat. The beers, but craft artisanal ales. Government taxation of public houses serving beer and wine is far from looking out for our health. It's a tax on people meeting and exchanging ideas freely. The legislation that condemned rave culture of the 90s made it essentially illegal for 6 or more people to meet. Those 6 or more people could be meeting in a public house and regularly exchanging revolutionary ideas, starting movements and societies in a environment that's safe, neutral territory, where everyone's free to share. Why a how-to video? Gruit is the centre of this. Gruit or gruit is essentially a bouquet garni type idea that you might add to food. A herb mixture might be used for bittering or just flavouring any type of beer, really. In with the mash, in with the wort. These are a part of your artisanal craft beers, but for decades now have been missing from the international dross that we get pumped through our televisions for us to buy. I recognise that different latitudes need different things. Your cool, crisp, blonde lager does cut through the heat of the Mediterranean, I confess. When it comes to the Caribbean and Creole areas, it's adding ginger and citrus that first gave us the shandy. Now, what is a shandy? I can hear Americans drawl calling Britain and Europe and Australia, and we know what shandy is. It's rather nice in the summer. It's a bit like small beer. What is small beer? I'll have to get to that as well, won't I? But this video has partly been inspired by news that over the last couple of years, Americans are slowly starting to discover the shandy. Now, there is Bertram shandy, but that isn't really it. It's got a certain reputation as being a slightly effeminate drink to order. Lemonade that dilutes any beer or ale to the point that it's low enough alcohol content that it's legal to serve to children. Perhaps half beer, half lemonade, or perhaps just a lager top. Just the last inch of the pint. 2 or 3 inches of the pint topped up with lemonade. How can Americans, especially not from the deep south, too busy with their bourbons or something, how can they not know this? But small beer, its fermentation is a preserving process. You're familiar with kimchi, perhaps? Another fermentation preserving process. Way back when, every village would have a family that kept the closely guarded secret of how to brew. Beer was in no way expensive, it was a daily thing for everyone. There was the time when any town of any size the water sources would have been polluted with sewage. People did throw sewage out onto the street. They did have to go a long way for their water sometimes. The communal fountain would have horses drinking from it, and who knows what went down the well. Small beer was a way of killing off germs. It was the bottled water of its day. It was just another little income stream. Some were obviously more popular and saleable than others, but if that proved the case, someone from the clan going on international publishing site and giving away the clan's secrets, you don't educate people for free. Knowledge is passed on from trusted generation to trusted generation after a period of apprenticeship and learning that you've paid for with your offspring, basically, becoming indentured. A cottage industry, though, predominantly female members of the family were the brewers. Perhaps the greatest peril would have been collecting your bouquet garni or gruit for the beer, leaving you open to accusations of witchcraft. There were, of course, monk brewers in monasteries that grew. Well, they did grow hemp and include hemp in the mix of the beer, but they cultivated very strong beers and kept very keenly very strong yeast for beers and ales. Yes, monks got drunk and stoned, or at least some orders did for some periods. Well, there were those nights under crusades that needed supplying. But until the Second World War and after, the milk that was produced in an area pretty much stayed in an area and was transformed into different things, but transporting milk tended to lead to TB, tuberculosis epidemics. Not so much from the milk, but the lack of hygiene of the containers for the milk. Kefir, fizzy yoghurt milk drink never really came back from the Crusades and took off. But another preserving method. Now in Britain we like our ales warm. Not warm as in heated up, room temperature. Sweet, full-bodied and fruity, without hops. With malted grains, but without hops. Malted barley-rich beers and, of course, ales are predominantly a carbohydrate. Any self-respecting farmhouse of yesteryear would have had the brew at a couple of 3 different stages, and a pottage on the stove. This pottage was a very, very thick soup of constantly changing vegetables. It was constantly replenished with every day's fresh produce that was available from the market or the garden. The same core soup would be there slowly on the stove for a week or longer. Just how your spaghetti bolognese gets better the next day, so too the pottage soup. If you're lucky, there might be some meat in the soup, but you need to have your gallon of beer every day. In almshouses and provision for the poor, a gallon of beer a day was what was needed for hydration, and given the same as millennials carry around with them with their little sippy cup water bottle things. And then there was your daily bread, the 3 ingredients of your diet: the gallon of beer, the pottage soup, and the loaf of bread. Thin, tinned soup that we are so familiar with. Do you drink or eat soup? Well, that's a debate for another time, isn't it? Depends if you use a spoon or not, I think. But just the same as you can't consider that consommé as anything close to pottage and really call them both soup, beer with good gruit becomes so much more nutritional than just carbohydrate. The malted barley-rich beers are rich in silicon. I've piqued your interest now, which is good for bones and maintaining the health of bones. It's got a lot of ortholocylic acid, a mineral that helps the body metabolise things. There's a lot of magnesium, antioxidants, and, well, there's several minerals and vitamins. If you had the gruit, you're choosing what vitamins and minerals to add to those that are already there. Lagers, a bit of a waste of time in that respect. They're the most consommé soup of the lot. A stout, porter, like Guinness, It is almost a meal, isn't it? Anywho, there's B vitamins in beer by the truckload. And it fills you up. Beer only ever used to be taxed when it got to a certain strength. Juniper berries and twigs, mosses and lichens were added in Scandinavian countries. With so many vegetables having an aniseed taint to them, it's easy to see how licorice could be a good palate pairing. Who now isn't tempted to add a gruit bouquet garni to their mash? Bouquet garni to their mash of sage or rosemary or bog myrtle or an antiseptic. Adding seasonal ingredients would change. You've got summer, spring, winter brews. Spruce tree tips. Are you familiar with the scent of fresh pine sap? There's a reason why so much gorse hedges grow. A popular ingredient, common heather, ground ivy, horehound, mugwort, sweet gale, yarrow. A huge variety, I'm sure I'm getting this across. Ginger, caraway seeds, aniseed, nutmeg, cinnamon, mint, and just your garden vegetables. Or perhaps rather salads and herbs. The seeds of rocket are powerful things. In France, for the first time, in the home of wine, we tend to think, for centuries, beer is now more popular than wine. This is causing problems for the wine industry, but the number of beer producers is expanding and improving. It's not just all Soissons Quatre. All beer isn't Belgian. Sweet gale gets added to the mash. Wild bergamot, Sitka spruce tips, spices as well as herbs, verbena, chamomile, coriander, orange peel, the flowers of almost anything remotely fragrant, woodworm, mugwort, turmeric, lemongrass, elderberries, Earl Grey tea, a Grenache grape. Did I say lavender, chamomile, elderberry? I'm tempted to explore what grains of paradise are that the brewer puts in by hand. Hyssop, peppercorns, dandelion, thyme, mugwort, oak bark. There are no end of healthy herb books out there now, are there? If you're doing the do and putting on a brew, throw it in. Experiment, go wild, travel back in time through your taste buds. 1 gallon mash at a time. Go for it, wort and all. Wort and all. Warts and all was how I used to like a Cotswold country pub. Go for it, wort and all. Wort and all. Warts and all was how I used to like a Cotswold country pub, especially in the autumn. The proprietors would just start to put on the log fires that crackled in the hearth. lit up the room with a non-uniform, non-conformist flicker. There was a buzz and a glow of warmth from people's cheeks as much as anything. The small, dark casks of oak behind the bar, stacked high and wide, of several different types from a couple of different seasons, each with their own tap, and there was always a few shiny brass phalluses on the bar that could provide the more well-travelled stock further afield from the cellars through the pipework. There was always food available of some time till a certain time, but very much secondary. The lounge and the bar given over to different things, not a male preserve and a female preserve, but the ingrained patina, the dirt of the flagstone floors of ages, has given way these days. It's been cleaned up, sanitised, the walls no longer their colour taken on through the smoke of the years of logs. Yes, the log fires are often still there, but just the same as the townscapes have had their buildings cleared of all the history of coal-fired homes that made many of our cities look like black-faced buildings rather than the honey-coloured stone so famous in northern Cotswolds and the paler beiges of the southern Cotswold country areas. Not so stained externally, because there hasn't been that particular pollution. Yes, our cities look a lot more cheerful, I suppose, brighter, but we have falsified how we depended on the pits until Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan came along. So this autumn the logs are crackling in the grates between the fire dogs, the ironwork of ages, but the whole pub environment has been given over to food. And I would like to say, and the worship of the celebrity chef in residence, but in so many cases it's the profit margin that's being worshipped. It's the same food that's delivered on the same trucks, already pre-prepared by the supplier, often far from local, that can enable the tightest of margins for the publican. We all lead quite sedentary lifestyles. When you go out for your Sunday lunch, you want a traditional roast meal. Yes, you get a cartoon of a Yorkshire pudding. But to order a beer, an ale, well, you have to have it before the meal, like a starter. Your beer has to be the hors d'oeuvre, or you just can't manage the beer and the hefty meal. There's the Christmas trade and the summer tourist, but in the autumn you do have the crackling fire, but the customers hardly pay for the log. Where once there were several village pubs, these have slowly dwindled and diminished in number, many of them given over to housing. Quite good quality conversions, a lot of them. Few maintaining the bar. Surely making a wonderful kitchen, an authentic feature. Some public houses were just one-room affairs, like going into someone's living room and your behaviour changes accordingly. You're not a lager lout. Micro-breweries are only possible when it's a free house, not owned by a major brewing concession, which in the interests of profits for their own brews would limit the artisanal craft ales. Casks behind the bar would just be considered a liability in terms of health and safety. A stainless steel or plastic barrel, not quite the same atmosphere, but product, yes, okay. Along with the fireside and the camaraderie, when you're amenable. The added value, the plus ingredient, is a folk band with traditional instruments. If a group of artists from the locality want to practice without the earache from the family and the neighbours, they can get together for a jam session, form an ever-changing series of band members in the very loosest possible sense, and this is how it's always been. Prestbury, Bishop's Cleeve area, north of Cheltenham, when you went to the Cheltenham races, you may well have sought out not necessarily the famous racing pubs like the Hollow Bottom. Yes, you heard me right on the name. There's a lot of amusing pub names, of course. But the Hollow Bottom is my favourite. But it doesn't tend to have that musical ingredient. In the centre of Cheltenham, there's what used to be the Crown and Cushion for generations, hundreds of years. It's just had its doors reinstated that were closed because, I don't know how they've managed this, it was closed because the road became such a busy A40 and drunk people would stumble out and potentially get run over. I think it might have alleviated because people just can't afford to get drunk in the pub anymore. Must have been written into the risk assessment. But the Crown and Cushion, if it doesn't, really should have a blue plaque on the wall saying this is where Brian Jones, local artist that formed and cultivated the early sound of the Rolling Stones, learnt his craft as a musician in numerous ever-revolving series of musician band ensembles until he became the driving force behind the Rolling Stones with the his boys that then kicked him out of the band when they needed that commercial acclaim and success and sold their souls to the devil and left the folk sound, the roots sound behind. In Painswick, little more than a single soul, often multi-talented musician, doing little more than busking inside in the warm, is the only pale imitation that the modern commercial environment can afford. And it's difficult to see that, say, a Western Blumenthal celebrity chef, ex-pub environment I'll call it, would really be able to accommodate a British ad hoc folk band and singer scene. While this is a lament for the Cotswold country pub, there are still so many of them to discover, and I really should do a how-to on how to discover them. There's so many little lanes, so many little villages, single-track roads, riverside secrets, there to be discovered. How should you do this? Well, I'd recommend at least a day van. A camper would be ideal, where you don't need to have someone share the driving. If you think about it, you can do a pub crawl in a day van. You can start 11:30, traditionally pubs used to open. So, have a pint in one. You can drive. You can drive a very zigzagging, meandering route because you're discovering the lanes, not because you've had a pint. Find another pub and have another pint. Choose a different ale. Try and choose the pubs from Camera, Real Ale, Cask Ale guide. By this time, you could still drive on to another place, perhaps to eat. Perhaps you want that celebrity chef experience. Why not? It's a beautiful pub in a beautiful environment. You could have another beer, but then you need to sleep it off. Sleep it off for a couple of hours. perhaps 3 hours, you've had 3 beers. If you leave it another hour after that, you'll be pretty much completely sober. 2 or 3 hours sleep, you're able to drive to another pub, have another pint, have another snooze. It might take you half an hour or an hour to get to your destinations. It may take you longer. Stop, take in the scenery, go on a country walk, and get back to the pub. Take a selfie with your local equestrian celebrity. Jaunty, get a picture with Jaunty. If David Parker's in his stately home, have a chat with one of the jockeys. There's always jockeys in the Hollow Bottom. Time it for autumn, wrap up warm, take in the colour. Westernburt Arboretum, it's all around you. You don't need to pay the entrance fee of $1.50 just to see them. Autumnal, fall, colour, the leaves fall, so let's call the season fall. It's all around you, like Cotswold love. Take cider with Rosie with you. Perhaps come back in summer for the cider. The scrumpy. Camp overnight in the pub car park and start your pub crawl again in the morning. You can spend a week or 2 doing this and you're going to love every minute of it. It's not difficult to find a campsite in the Cotswolds. It's not difficult to find somewhere to do a stand-up wash. The country streams are bearable. Do you see what I did there? And temperature-wise, but don't go in the Severn. It's strong tides. You get washed away. Strong swimmers only. And there's not really much in the way of like beach possibility. It goes deep quite quick. The Red Lion at Wainloads, it's got a campsite attached. There's others. Take a camper pub crawl round Cotswold country pubs. Autumn, spring. Winter would be harder. Summer, too populated. Autumn is perfect. This is partly a lament to the ever-changing Cotswold country pub and its lack of constancy and priority within the march of single concept, clear marketing of consumerism within the capitalist model, and a how-to video on the nutritional and health-giving properties of real cask ales, not your mass-produced chemical lagers, your blonde beers, but craft artisanal ales. Government taxation of public houses serving beer and wine is far from a looking out for our health. It's a tax on people meeting and exchanging ideas freely. The legislation that condemned rave culture of the 90s made it essentially illegal for 6 or more people to meet. Those 6 or more people could be meeting in a public house and regularly exchanging revolutionary ideas, starting movements and societies in a environment that's safe, neutral territory, where everyone's free to share. Why a how-to video? Gruit is the centre of this. Gruit or gruit is essentially a bouquet garni type idea that you might add to food. A herb mixture that might be used for bittering or just flavouring any type of beer, really. In with the mash, in with the wort.